All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad to be here with my friends Jesse, Paul, and Giulio. If you're familiar with the channel, you've met them all before, so I think we're going to skip a lot of our introductions today. And actually, I just interrupted Giulio as we were talking, and he was on a roll. So I'm just going to pass the mic back to him, ask him to back up and start again, if that's okay. And we're just going to bounce off from there, I think.
No, it's a good. So, hello everyone, and thank you for having me. So I think it's great that you interrupted me because perhaps I was just rambling too long. But to be brief, we were talking about online communities and what it means to be, to have a spiritual life, even in the face or within social media and internet and whatnot. And we were basically saying that social media sort of allows us to be something that may or may not be based on our, life outside of social media. So basically, the example I made is that, I may be a baker, I may have a family, and the people in my life will perceive me mostly as that. But then I may also go online and be some kind of, arc libertarian or anarcho-capitalist shill who, you know, mm, I don't know, posts Nickland propaganda and maybe has his own thought, has his own blog, has his own original ideas. Um, and no one who knows me in real life maybe see that in me. So there is something interesting in all social media in social media because for in one hand it denies us the possibility to talk to people in a way that is that also involves concreteness and the other senses that are not vision basically, but also there is this side that allows us to express ourselves maybe better in a way because we're free from the the way that our society or immediate society and or immediate people who know us um think of us. So there is a bit of this, I don't know, yeah, there is this maybe paradoxical approach to social media where they allows us to express ourselves more freely, but also they takes something from us that normal interaction do not take away from us. So that's basically my view in short.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. As you were saying that, I was thinking about online community and how we can be participating in a community with like an entire persona that's different in a way that's like you could always do that. You could always be a different guy at work than you were at the bar afterwards or whatever, right? And have different personas in different arenas, so to speak. But now the arena is like whatever you want it to be, and your persona is whatever you want it to be, like you're saying. And so you're almost like living a double life sometimes. Not you, anyone, hypothetically. And and yeah, that's an interesting way to frame that, because what does that mean for us who do online community, and how do we be real in it, and how do we be true to both versions? Because there's got to be something true in the online version too. It's got to be an aspect of what we actually are too, not just something fake, I think.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
probably, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear from Paul. I might be the outlier in the conversation with the four of us, probably a little bit more. I mean, Wendell Berry is one of my biggest heroes, and the idea of, embodied local community is pretty foundational to me. I think of our kind of time in this age, our lifetimes in empirical history as an opportunity to discover ourselves together in a kind of repentance. And I think that works best um, in the most kind of holistic and single-minded way possible. Christ talks about being single-minded. That's a better translation, I think, than, the pure in heart. It's actually the single sort of single focused or what have you. Um, so I tend to, I'm not anti, I'm not at all anti, all of the technology. I think history keeps offering us more and more ways. The printing press, the alphabet, like these. We've been doing this for a long time, giving ourselves more options for interacting, and that's not a bad thing. So, I'm not anti-technology or anti the online world at all, but I do think I would privilege and say that spiritual practice comes in an embodied community first and foremost, and that the best online interactions will kind of be in line with that. Whoever you are, whatever if you're a baker, with a family, it's probably most healthy if that's part of your online presence as well in some way. But that's just a quick thought off the top of my head.
What the conversation makes me think about like the fact, I mean, in all recorded history, spiritual, social revolutions or communications revolutions. Like um cuneiform tablets play a part in axial age religion and thought. Christians were communications innovators with the Codex. And that's why, we have these New Testament books is because of a communication technology revolution. And, obviously the printing press is another big one that brought us very focused on the
The
tech.
Protestants get to check a box
They
too.
get a
So.
big one. They get, and yeah, and I don't know. Yeah. And
I'm
when we're
just joking.
living out the consequences of that box being checked, good and bad, it's
Mhm.
always, it seems like that's the nature of change is often, oof, the old way was better and healthier, but we're not going back in some ways. It feels like it. So I guess I bring to this like an acute, it's appropriate to have an acute awareness that we're in the midst of a communications technology revolution, that we'll look back. It's gotta be the internet. It has to be will be, in at the end, a much bigger communications technology revolution than the printing press and what's happening. And so I don't even come with conclusions, but just kind of a wide-eyed, what's happening? The transformation is underway. And there's this, I don't know if y'all feel it, but there's almost a sense of like we are at the hockey stick of like progress, not progress in a like history seems to be accelerating. Like if you look at any aspect of human affairs from, how we, you know, wealth is in this long process of once being land and then becoming more liquid with currencies and then more liquid with online, and now with the flick of a button we can transfer money and value
I might
anywhere.
distinguish between those two things, but you can
Well,
transfer money. I'm not so sure you can transfer
yeah,
value.
no, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me,
Well,
let,
I hope that this video will transfer some value,
yes, yes.
though
Well,
no money at all.
the the idea that this revolution is bigger, because I completely agree. We're in a communication revolution, and one of the epochal, like it's probably I mean, it's easily one of the big three in the whole history of humanity, right? But I do wonder if you could make a case that our revolutions are actually getting more and more diffuse and pathetic. So the big revolution was the alphabet. And, Plato, Socrates protested the invention of the alphabet famously, and I think it's Phaedrus, but, he says, gosh darn it, we've invented the alphabet. No longer are humans going to, you know, hold language in their hearts. Our hearts are going to be emptied onto pages of, manuscripts or tablets or whatever, and we're going to stick all of that on the shelf, this shelf behind me, that used to all be in someone's heart. And now it's sitting on my shelf and it just looks good in the backdrop of my video, right? I haven't read half those books. Um, but that's like Plato's, so the alphabet might have been the big invention, and then, the kind of ways of using the alphabet are actually just more and more less and less impactful on our spiritual life. The printing press actually dilutes further, and then the internet dilutes further. I'm intentionally, reversing the story, more really playing devil's advocate, but just to kind of say, I don't think the course of history makes much sense as either, simple progress or simple like devolution. David Bentley Hart famously compares it to a storm at sea. I mean, this age is a stormy age, I would say. And a lot of things that look like they're going up are actually going down, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I didn't progress. I didn't unfolding. I don't even mean that in in a sense of my use of the word progress there doesn't imply toward good. That's really, but it
Mm,
does to me, it feels like the rate of change is accelerating. You said three big, and this might be
mhm,
there's a sense this might be the last one. Like, like this is
mhm.
moving really
Yeah,
fast,
it
and
is.
everything hinges on really how we program ourselves. You know, um,
Yeah, well, it was interesting, Jesse, was when you reversed the narrative, that was helpful for me to think about because I was thinking when you said the printing press diluted things, and I think that idea of diluting is really helpful because it's a proliferation of information, of communication, which by necessity is a dilution, right? Because there's just more volume to dilute the academics, the world of learning, and the world of writing. There's just more volume, and so it's diluted. And it used to be that books were really hard to make, and so you only made the best ones, and you only copied the best ones. And then with the printing press, anybody could put out anything if you had a bit of cash. And then now, of course, with social media, people are hearing about each other's farts and dinners and whatever. And that's very much a dilution of the world of writing and of communication, and for sure. But it's also allowed for this. It's also allowed for a deepening. The diversity, I think, comes with maybe the same amount of crap and good stuff that there was with Socrates, but it's just both are proliferated to a huge extreme. And so we're inundated with bullshit in the technical sense, and we're also afforded the ability, like I've got a couple of books here. I said maybe I'd read something from Basil the Great casually, right? This guy who doesn't know Greek, who just happened to buy the book online because I saw it on a video one time. And all of that is also made possible by the revolution. But yeah. Giulio, did you have
Yeah.
something to... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, a lot of points were raised here, and I'm happy. I think that you're right that a lot of people may, since the printing press and also now with social media, they can put out basically the worst things possible. But also they also have the chance to make themselves heard. There it is important that even not necessarily people who have some kind of important education or titles, or they're considered to be authorities in their fields, express their thoughts. I'm very much not an intellectual elitist in any way, uh, because, and that's maybe just my personal experience. I have learned a lot, not only from theologians, from philosophers, but also from people who, aren't famous and do not have like particularly, rich education and stuff like that. So I just think that it would be too bad if those people were silenced because they do not have the means to make themselves heard, basically. And I think also that um, we with regard to what Jesse was saying regarding experience and very integral knowledge. Uh, of course, ideally that will be true, but not everyone is lucky enough to have to witness any kind of theophany in a way that they wouldn't expect. So for example, you had people like Saint Athanasius who will talk about theosis, divinization, not only from abstract theological reasoning, but also from their own experience, from what they saw among the monks and the people that they actually knew. But not everyone is so lucky. So some people may just read books and formulate ideas, by consequence. So and perhaps that may even be a good thing. Not everyone is ready to witness a theophany. So yes. On the other hand, though, there is a great Russian poet. Maybe it was Tyutchev. I can't remember who it was, who said something along the lines of a thought that is expressed in words is already a lie, and that I think speaks volumes to the more paradoxical or antinomical approach that I'm trying to express. So as I said, from with the example of social media, but also it will work on books as well. On one hand, you have the possibility to be something that in your immediate community you couldn't be, but also you would be still a weakened version, a watered down version of yourself that you are putting out for the oi polloi to read. So there is also a point of liberation together with a point of slavery that you do when you write a book, or when you put out your ideas on social media or on the internet in general. And that's about my view. So yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that's kind of just the way communication is, though. I think, like when I think of a thought and communicating a thought, these words that I'm speaking right now, I didn't know them ahead of time. I didn't formulate them and plan them, like as in I sat down and thought, well, these are the words I'm going to say. I would have said something better, obviously, and they're just like a crystallization snapshot of my thoughts, which are not, they're amorphous. They don't have a shape, a concrete shape. They are living, whatever that means. But when I say them, then they have a concrete shape, and you can say, well, Justin, actually what you said was this, and I can go, well, actually, okay, maybe that's what I said, but it's not what I meant. Maybe that's the words I used, but it's not what my thoughts were. And I wonder if that's true, like what you were saying, Giulio, of all forms of communication, then whether it's writing on the page or speaking our words, or anything, that when we put our thoughts out, that they become solidified and they're liquid inside of us. But
I think you said a kind of liberation and a kind of enslavement at the same time.
yeah, they're constricted. Yeah, and liberated. I guess they're freed from the confines of my thoughts, but they're restricted in the view of what they are.
Well, yeah, I think that thought exceeds language. So any kind of communication, be it a book or a post on social media or whatever, is a communication that is given along the lines of a very general view that everyone in your community can understand, and your thoughts not necessarily must be bound by that community or by that general rules. I very much believe that they may transcend all of that, even though of course they're tied to that, they're informed by that, and all that. I'm not denying that, language and context do inform our thought. But my uh, my view that is probably a view that I always had without get into it in by reasoning or anything like that. So it's probably completely false. But I generally tend to see thought as something that exceeds language and communication. So in that sense, I agree with you. Yeah. But I think that Jesse was saying something. But
No, I was just I appreciated your image of every time we communicate something, we're both liberating something from our thought life and enslaving something. There's and I think yeah, the idea that the realm of thought transcends. I mean, I think it transcends us each. As well as the language in a contextual sense. I mean, I don't know if any of you have read All Things Are Full of Gods, but of course, the idea of mind, mind and language both in there. Of course, Hart would make that same basic claim that it's transcendent. But I think there's in communicating, there's a kind of loop, right? I mean, so we are both receiving and giving, and I guess the question with media is, does it generally help us, in those kind of communication loops, to gain the best understanding of ourselves and each other, by having more channels, or less channels. I mean, we were talking about the Desert Fathers. It's a funny thought exercise to say, if Saint Anthony were here, right? My ideas about theosis, sadly, are probably mostly from the internet. And like you were saying, St. Anthony's ideas about theosis were from his own personal experience and observing the personal experience of, the brothers surrounding him in various, mostly more isolated, desert monastic settings. A conversation between like St. Anthony and me about theosis, I don't even know if you could call it a conversation. I just I don't know. I tend to have I tend to think, without demeaning myself, or I'm not crying about it or beating myself up, but I just think I have quite a bit less available to me, um, with which to talk about theosis than St. Anthony. Um, and Even though I have more books, far more books, far more, people I can chat with online, with my thumbs or with a video call like this. So there's a kind of diminishment that isn't my fault. It's the reality, and I tend to see things that way. So that's more like, and but I think spiritually, if I can receive the life that I have, and enjoy, the conversations like these, and seek to be authentic. In another sense, maybe there are certain ways in which I have more than St. Anthony, so I don't think it's an all one way or the other, but I think you have to kind of articulate both.
I may take that chance to pitch a little bit my social media project and tie it in because I think it's relevant and it ties into my goal is to be for our social media space to be something that St. Anthony or perhaps Athanasius, whichever one, would approve of and want to participate in. Not even approve of. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that they would want to participate in. I'm not seeking approval. I'm seeking value. But I would trust Anthony and Athanasius to assess value quite well, because I agree with Jesse that when you read the books, it's just clear that their minds are in a different place than the minds of those around me and that I know, even of the educated type, and that there's something in the church fathers that is just brilliant beyond anything that I read now. That's why I don't read modern books, even though I love all the people who write them. And I don't know, I write books and I don't want to read them. I want to read I want to read Basil or Eugen or whatever. But anyway, I think one of the questions that is key is to separate out the technology and the application of the technology. So we have social media that has got algorithms in it that are specifically designed through market research to what I would say and what the Desert Fathers would say to stir up our passions. It's there to bring up our anger, to bring up our jealousy, to bring up our gluttony, to bring up our whatever, right? And they stir it up and then they sell it as advertising to other people. And the algorithms are designed to do that, and they don't use that language to describe it. They use it as, we've done good marketing research and we know how to make good sales and sell ad space and keep people engaged and blah, blah, blah. But that's what, when you try to talk about it honestly, that's what that means. And that's where the problem lies in my mind, not in the tech itself, because this conversation, which isn't, although we didn't get here without Facebook and it wouldn't have happened without Meta and it wouldn't have been possible, what we're doing right now is not governed by that. It's just four of us talking and the technology is recording it and allowing us to speak across the world to one another in 3 different countries and meet people that I just wouldn't even know existed and have conversations that wouldn't have been possible. In my local community, I don't know anyone who has the capacity, just from, like, you guys all have a certain amount of learning and reading and stuff that you've done, and growth and experience and whatever it is that makes this conversation possible, that the people in a local church here that I would attend might not be able to engage with in the same way, even though they're lovely and wise in their own other ways. And I think that sometimes we kind of forget how magical that is. And I've sometimes used the imagery talking to people. I say the phone in my pocket, like, if I explained this to someone in the pre-modern world anywhere at any time, it would be like I have a mirror in my pocket. I can gaze into it, see the faces of people around the world and speak with them. I can ask it questions like an oracle. It's not always right, but it often has a lot to tell me, right? And it also brings resources and connects me and allows me to do trade with people and things like that. That everybody would have one, just like everybody has one now. And all the church fathers would have one. And they would hopefully want to use it well. And so what we've done is we were trying to get off. Our virtual chapel community is growing, and we're trying to host a new social media space. Not trying to, we are. It's in the soft launch, hard launch right now kind of thing. And we're bringing a bunch of different communities together who are all paying for the private social media behind the scenes, so it's free to the public. And we're curating a space where you don't want to scroll forever. And honestly, I go onto the app and I scroll for a bit and I'm like, these are really cool posts. And then like 15 minutes later, I'm like, I'm done reading contemplative essays right now. And it's not addictive in the same way because it's not filled with ads and addictive things. It's filled with deep thoughts that you can only take in so much and then you want to go reflect on while you walk in the woods or whatever. And I think that use of it, with these kinds of videos and those kinds of engagements, when we remove the advertising and the predatory algorithms and the people, if I'm being fully honest, I'm not usually a conspiracy theorist, but I think they're, tilting elections and stuff like that. And that, there's all kinds of international espionage going on in Facebook and all the social media stuff. And it's weird to think about that. And so a refuge from all of that. And I wonder if then it will just be like the fact that, you know, I can buy this, and that's a beautiful thing, and maybe it will just contribute to everything. But I don't know if that landed with everybody or not. But.
I've been sitting here thinking about how quaint this conversation will look. Mark our calendars next year when Justin's hosting a community that he can actually invite AI Athanasius to. And the next, it's going to be Jesse and Maximus the Confessor AI on here. And then, I just wonder, how fun will that be or not? Like when we have St. Anthony here to explain theosis to us in all its depth and richness. I don't know. I guess the balance is between everything potentiated by the technologies and the reality that kind of our natural impulses are being hijacked by it at all times. We've referred to just like negativity bias being exploited. It's the most addictive thing is whatever, gets you, makes the hair on stand, that reaction. Like you almost, I use social media as like a barometer for how I'm doing spiritually. If I find myself open my laptop and go, oh, these people need to hear my opinion, I know that's a day I need to meditate more. There are days where I feel like everybody just really needs my opinion and days when not. But boy, it's exciting, and it's exciting to be able to look over your shoulder, Justin, as you kind of explore all of these things, because we are in the cocoon phase of something that's happening.
We have the relics of Maximus the Confessor in our silly little parish. The way relics get spread around, they're just wax, little tiny pieces of wax that have been melted with flecks of bone. And then the wax is melted and put into more wax, and that's cut in half. And, then two people have the relics. So possibly,
no way, really?
Yeah, possibly some molecule
So cool.
of Saint Maximus the Confessor's body. But they're in a reliquary with a little icon, and we have my priest collects relics like crazy. We have one of the most shocking when people come in. There's a beautiful icon of the the feast with Abraham when the three angels come, and the hospitality of Abraham, I think it's called. There's a very famous Russian one, of course, and kind of Trinitarian, etc. But there's a little reliquary at the bottom of that, and everyone who comes in is like, "How do you have a relic of the Holy Trinity?" But it's a little flake of a tree that is supposed to be descended from the oak tree that the oak of Mamre, or wherever he put the food under. So my priest loves relics, but
I love
my
that.
point
That's
in
awesome.
bringing this up is I do think it would be fun to chat with AI St. Maximus, and you could actually build a really, really cool, AI St. Maximus. Jordan Daniel Wood is translating, all of his letters into English for the first time, and like he wrote a lot. So you really could probably train a large language model that would, if you imported everything St. Maximus wrote, it would be pretty awesome to interact with, because he really comes that language from so many different directions. We have enough of his writing. I don't know that, and sort of intellectually at the idea level, that could be an incredible kind of sustained experience. St. Anthony, I think, was a little bit more, I don't think we have as much, in writing. It was more of a personal encounter,
Yeah,
so
he's the legend. Not that he
yeah,
wasn't real, but he's a legendary figure rather than a literary figure like that.
yeah, and I believe that the real encounter with him would have been probably terrifying. Honestly, like it was probably quite wonderfully intense, but very intense. But that creates legend in history. He didn't write, like Socrates or someone, he doesn't, or Jesus for that matter, he didn't, write a word. But what I guess I keep pushing back, Paul, a little bit, as you say, a year from now, how quaint this conversation would be. In one sense, yeah. I think we could have a, fifth person on the screen, AI St. Maximus, and he'd probably shut us all up. You know, totally fair. It would be awesome. Um, but at the same time, I still would say even that great experience and very value laden, meaningful, I would learn a lot every time, would be short of um, a meal with him, in some way that I would hope I would always sort of still be learning that difference in my own life. Probably one of the most delightful things I have to thank the internet for is that, I got to sit in a restaurant and wait for David Bentley Hart to show up once in my life. And I have one meal with the old, the stodgy old nutcase. He comes in with this long coat, looking around all grumpy. That was amazing, I mean, and I don't, so yeah, um, I'm always going to feel like the speed and the revolution for most of us is more of a danger than a help. It's not offering. So the fact that this conversation will look quaint a year from now, because we could include St. Maximus. I buy a lot of that in positive ways, but I'd always say, don't get too excited. It's just as cool as that is, and as good and helpful as that is, it's not um, enjoying a community where there might be a St. Maximus.
Yeah, and that's what I was ended thinking saying. The thing to be cautious of is it feels like everything that happens online is a simulacrum that hijacking a human need. And the obvious, most blunt, brute example is porn hijacking our impulse for connectivity. And it's it's not like porn will one day get so good we actually connect with another human being by watching it. There's nothing
Mhm.
you could hijack that impulse to the nth degree and it won't take you anywhere good. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it ain't going away, and neither will AI Maximus the Confessor. Your story though, Jesse, of what the internet brought you was a lunch with David Bentley Hart. What's been in my mind one time is that as we've been speaking, um, years ago, I wrote a very ambitious novel. I spent 10 years writing it. And then near the tail end of it, it's a retelling of the Bible's story as the love story of God wooing humankind to be his bride in a world where we humans have lost the plot. And telling, as it turned out, the story of the origins, history, and destiny of human civilization through that lens was a real ambitious task. And then I signed with a literary agent, and I was all excited, and I had reason to have high hopes. And then it was all, he finally, ended up getting a Dear John letter, lament to, the agent said, acquisitions editors with a literary bent like it, marketing teams shoot it down because you don't already have a platform. This is the new publishing reality. And I was bummed. And right around then, I had posted some poems that I recited online. And Malcolm Guite, I don't know if y'all are familiar
Hmm.
with him.
Hmm.
At a time where I felt like the human on planet Earth most whose critique or praise I would most value was Malcolm Guite's, and he didn't know me. In the wild, he saw one of my poems online, reposted it, and those words, like that
Hmm.
encouragement, are the things that they're
Yeah.
part of the reason the book now exists as an actual paper that got off my hard drive in between covers,
Hmm.
and I'm going to go meet him next month,
Yeah.
which is
That's
super
awesome.
cool. And so then I will always look back on that as my David Bentley Hart lunch story will probably be a tobacco pipe with Malcolm Guite next month.
Which beats mine, by the way. Tobacco with Malcolm Guite, is better than a chain restaurant lunch with David Bentley Hart. South Bend, Indiana. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a good a good antidote, and the power of the encouragement from our heroes like that in the online space is crazy. It's interesting,
Yeah.
interesting to contemplate. I mean, the kind of openness and vulnerability of your story, but uh, Julia, this what you talk about of kind of having something to share, right? That is such a beautiful, powerful thing that we have a need to that express ourselves, kind of language. And yeah, so I'd be interested to hear what you're thinking as you listen in.
Oh yeah. So the first thing that I thought is that I also saw the relics of St. Maximus the Confessor when I went to Romania.
Hmm.
And yeah, so and also it was a very small relic together with others such as, St. Benedict of Nursia
Hmm.
and others that I don't even remember right now, but I'll probably try to think about it. And yes, however, I think that even AI Maximus that could be based on all these writings and all that still wouldn't give us back the real Maximus still. So because it harkens back to what we were saying earlier. When we put out something, when we write something, we are expressing ourselves, but also we are expressing ourselves in a way that is not integral. So there are the limitations that are related to language, to maybe the what you are responding to when you write something and things like that. So, for example, maybe St. Maximus would have said his things in different ways if he weren't, responding to, fallacious or debating Pyrrhus and things like that. So if we, and that's also why I'm quite skeptical of issues, techno-futuristic issues such as mind uploading, where even if my body dies, then my mind will be uploaded to some kind of database, and I'll be basically immortal even without my body, without my direct experiences and all that. And also, even regardless of all that, I don't think that AI is the right thing to do that. Also, because um, something that I've done is, try to debate AI or something like that. That I think everybody has done that at some point. Um, so, and also I try to have AI have, and by AI, I mostly use DeepSeek and Grok. But I try to have them, to have two philosophers who are somewhat unrelated to each other, debate and stuff like that. So for example, I remember I remember that I had David Bentley Hart debate Bulgakov. So AI, sort of tried to make up a, more so to have Bulgakov as some kind of defender of traditional orthodoxy, whereas Hart was more the innovator, basically. Um, and then I had Lev Shestov joined the mix, and then it was basically insults between Hart and Shestov. So I don't think that that's how it will actually play out if the three men were actually to meet up in real life and talk about theology and philosophy and things like that. So and I think that all of them, that everything that they have written is available online in a way or another, or most of the things probably, yeah. So you can still have it's somewhat like of a clear picture of what each of those three, think if you are AI. So, and still you had AI sort of highlight some differences that aren't really there. And you had them, AI had them behave in a way that you wouldn't expect from them. So maybe it will get better. Maybe it will improve its ability to I don't know, represent people's personalities better. But still, we're talking about large language models. So AI analyzes texts and sort of makes up its the author as it analyzes texts, whereas if you have someone like David Bentley Hart talk to you and you ask him questions, then you get to know the author, and then you get to know the thoughts, because so the experience may be quite different in a way, and it may be more complete if you meet in real life. And also uh, even to go back to experiences and stuff like that. Um, I remember that the Russian Orthodox saint Seraphim of Serov, and there is a very popular, you know, yeah, hagiographic book where he basically is with his student, and he has this very, this very important theophany, and he's basically externalizes the effects of theosis for his student to see. And the questions that he asks him are not only, this is what I look, can you see what I look like? But also they comprise smell and touch and all the other senses. So, um, as I said, when you write something, you're putting out only a version of yourself. But everything else is, and I said it is great because other people who wouldn't be able to get to know your thoughts, now they can. But for a more integral knowledge, then of course a concrete encounter with the other is necessary.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking as well, Giulio. You sort of spoke my mind. In the Quaker language, you would say that friend speaks my mind. Because I was thinking about our own conversation here, and the four of us have all written things, which none of us have read, right? Like, I haven't read any of your full corpus of writing in the way that an AI model of any of you could do. And so, if there were AI models of all four of us built on our writing, even including, say, our texts with other people and stuff, like you could get really detailed with all of that with the internet. You could have like all my conversations with my ex-girlfriend and blah, 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 all of that. But it still probably would never produce this conversation, because I don't think any of us ever wrote about whether or not there could be an AI Maximus, the Confessor. Probably. I don't know. But I'm guessing none of us ever wrote about that. And so the AI models wouldn't bring it in. And there's something just organic in the spirit of it. I don't know how to say it, whether it comes from the top or the bottom or the middle or whatever. That just wouldn't be present in a collection of all of our writings and thoughts. That is only present in a dialogue between people. And maybe between an AI and a person sometime. I don't know about that. But either way, I don't think the AI models of us based on our writing would produce this conversation, and therefore it wouldn't be us.
Yeah, and what we're never going to get is an AI Maximus or Athanasius whose heart has been broken because their kids go to schools where they do school shooter drills, or who's feels like he's losing his soul because he's got a desk job in this weird consumerist digital panopticon surveillance state. Like, our world's so foreign to them. So what's actually, those are all going to be fun. It's going to be a fun hobby to hang out with AI Maximus the
Oh, for
Confessor.
sure.
But
I would love
there's,
to.
I would too,
Yeah,
you know.
it would be even better. Of course, I'm going to say to do Eriugena, but that's just because Eriugena synthesized so much. You could add Maximus, Dionysius, Gregory, Augustine. You could put it all in there, and it would all be part of Eriugena. It would be like a better Eriugena in some ways, not in the real way, but like he could synthesize even more. Anyway, but that's just like my side tangent.
I have to suspect some of these heroes we're talking about would be such revolutionaries in our world. You know, I mean, when as you're describing, Paul, the sadness of our world, and all of our lives in so many ways, you know, with the kind of consumerized, and diffuse way in which all of us are being sort of dragged around, um, by by our passions, with, by these algorithms controlled by just, you know, a very wealthy, few very wealthy people, frankly. It's ridiculous. And, I think, yeah, that kind of voice crying out, would be intense. And so that's kind of a condemning thing when I hear, if I think about what kind of a life would a Maximus or, Eugenia live today? And how would they be speaking to our society? It would have to be quite, I think, quite a terrible message, um, intense message. But I just hope David Bentley Hart hears that there are people out there who are, listens to our conversation and hears that there are people creating AI versions of him to have conversations with, AI versions of Bukoko. That's awesome. That's so funny. And then analyzing, the conversations, and like, I don't think the AI David Bentley Hart will ever be quite as rude as the real David Bentley
It might be as
Hart.
rude, but it'll never be as witty.
All of this is making me think. So I'm thinking back, when after in the previous millennia, at the end of the 1900s, which really feels like a completely different world from this vantage point. I hitchhiked around Central America. I was really enamored I kind of crossed paths with people like John Sobrino in El Salvador and that kind of liberation theology crowd, and then animated by their values of incarnational theology, went and lived in the poorest community I had ever encountered. It was a rural cooperative called Tierra Nueva that had no running water, electricity, nobody there knew how to read. And so then we would have church together under the mango tree, which is really just kind of like telling Bible stories and talking about them. And it was really interesting for me to observe what a completely not text based. So the only two people in town who could read words were me, and I was still learning Spanish that I was speaking as a second language, and Demesio, who it took him, it took a long time to get through Demesio reading a sentence from the Bible. And so it literally, like, nobody would grok a reading until we've just told the story. And once the story came off the page and we're there under the mango tree just telling it, and the story exists just in the air between us and not on a page, I noticed there's a completely different quality to your relationship to the story, much less of a tendency to get dogmatic. You could come out of Tierra Nueva and see Pentecostal evangelicals with the completely, like, people who grew up not terribly literate. Like, they can read, they went to Bible school, but getting through a Pauline epistle is a chore. But they're running churches where they could tell their congregation, right here in black and white, God says not to wear makeup. So the people at that church are going to hell because they wear makeup. Look, it says it. And people who could read, I'll be damned. It does say that, that we got to go to this one little church in Zacatecoluca where they have the real word of God. He proved it to me. That, and it was just so derailed. Like the text-basedness had derailed them completely. Now the story exists on paper like a law that you apply to yourself and others. So I guess, and there's a completely different just quality to the nature of the story when it exists orally in the air between you or on a page to be defended and all of that. And
You
so
just
then,
condemned the invention of the alphabet 10 times better than Plato.
right, and it deserves it. Like, yeah. But then
Well,
I guess where I was taking that is like, yeah, is it a return to our archaic past when we can manifest pre-literate people with us to interact? Or, I guess I'm just wondering how does the nature of thought see? It seems like the nature of thought under the mango tree versus in the dogmatic church is completely different. So then how do these technologies change the very nature of thought? And it's hard to see because it's the fish going, what is water?
yeah, so I have a bunch of thoughts about that, and I'm gonna invoke Eriugena, just like you were talking about it. I already believe that he's present here, just like Maximus, because we've been speaking of them, and they exist for all time, in my understanding, as all things do, and all of us do, um, outside of time, before and after time. Or as Jesse might say, in some kind of other time, which I'm starting to get a better grasp on. As a side note, listening to some of the stuff when I talked to DBH and he was describing the eon, it's like I'm starting to get it a little better, the idea of a different time. But that's a side tangent. The thing I want to say, though, is Eriugena's main book, Paraphysian. It's written as a Platonic dialogue, and I think that that's really important because a book, and that's why David Bentley Hart, I assume, wrote All Things Are Full of Gods as a dialogue between gods. And for those who are watching, Platonic dialogue in a book just means like it's a script for a play. It says, Justin says this, Jesse said that. Paul said this, Jesse said that. And then it's just a conversation written on paper. And so almost 1,000 pages of Eriugena's Paraphysian are written as a conversation between a master and a student, and asking questions and thinking things through and reflecting on things. And at one point, Eriugena is describing knowledge and what it is and how we gain it. And he says that every time we learn something, we participate in the angelic realm where that knowledge exists, and we are united with it. And there's what John Vervaeke calls a contact epistemology, and he helped me understand Eriugena. But this notion that our minds come into real contact with real things and are shaped by them, and that it's the contact of our mind with reality that allows us to know things, and that it's not just sort of perceiving illusions, that our mind actually like touches the world and touches each other and touches the angelic realms. And the example he gives then is he's talking to a student in this dialogue, which you become a part of when you read a dialogue. You become a third-party observer in a dialogue. And he says, in the same way that the angels are created in us when we learn things, we are created in each other when we talk to each other in this dialogue. And that I have been created in you as you have understood the things which I say, and you have been created in me as I understand the things which you say. And I think of it like patterns in a way, and I genuinely believe that now at the end of this, there's a piece of each of us in each of us, that like the patterns. It's not really a piece like you lost something, but like the imprint, the pattern, the there's no real good word for it, but the substance of the spirit in our minds, the angels and the demons inside of us, which we trade freely between us. Exist in us, and I think that they go through time. And now Eriugena, this conversation is happening because he brought up this topic in a conversation I had with him, and that makes him present and exist in each of you and everyone who watches this. And I think that that's like my kind of in between there, where I think because the book allowed that, at the same time, even though it didn't give us the full Eriugena, it did give us some. I don't know if that made sense. I'm just rambling about my weird spiritual stuff now.
Yeah. No, language allows a real communion, even when it's mediated by the alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, I remember reading the parts of the Periphysion a few months back, in my free time. But nowadays I don't have free time at all, so I'm saving it for when I will get it back. So I'm not really ready to comment on anything Eugene has said specifically, but sort of tangentially, related. There is this idea in the great Russian theologian, Pavel Florensky, um, who said something along the lines of, the fallen self being a kind of disgregation that we are, divided in parts that cannot, really be reconciled with each other and whatnot. But then he also said that our natural reaction is to sort of crystallize into a kind of counterfeit whole. So what he says is what he calls it is I think I don't know how it is in English, but it's like a self-identity or something like that. Um, but that is not that's not the real me. That is just my attempt to group together all the pieces that are scattered around. But still that is just a crystallization that is fake. And then he admits instead for a kind of a change for a progressive change in me. So and that's also why I don't think that AI Maximus would be actually Maximus, because even if you can group together all his writings, then still not necessarily the person who even who at the moment of his death or whatnot, the moment when he wrote a certain things would necessarily be exactly the same as it was when he wrote that thing. So in a way, AI could only group together all the pieces and try to construct what seems to result from that, and but that wouldn't give us the real Maximus. It would just be a kind of identification of something with Maximus, and that's not necessarily the same thing. So yeah, that's why I think that even if there is certainly a fallen, a certain element of fallenness in our disgregation and whatnot, then change is not necessarily something that is evil and that needs to be fought, because also when we think of Saint Gregory of Nyssa, for example, one of the most important insights that we find in his thought is the concept of epectasis, this eternal stretching out into eternity, and that presupposes that humans are mutable creatures, so we constantly change, we constantly change in the image and in the likeness of God. So and that in turn presupposes that we change with a contact with God and with the other people. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. That not necessarily the antidote to the disgregation that the fall brings about in ourselves is any kind of crystallization or any kind of objectification of this or that other person, or of myself.
I want to throw you got my head thinking a bunch of stuff, and I want to throw out a question that's been like at my growing edge of wondering when it comes to this stuff. And so when I think about consciousness and what it is, and I have no idea what it is, and so I have to start there, which means that I don't know how to measure it, or objectively test for its presence, because I don't even know what it is. So that's sort of like my starting point. But then there's kind of two basic, I'm going to overgeneralize, theories of how brains and minds are related to each other. One's a top up or a bottom up, and one's a top down. And these are gross characterizations and overgeneralizations. But the idea, the bottom up being that, like, you know, the brain is so complicated that a mind emerges out of it, and like, that's the bottom-up approach. And then the top-down approach is that there is already a mind, and a mind is what sort of organizes the brain into being and utilizes it and speaks through it. And those are sort of like the two big options that people consider in general terms, as I understand them. And I wonder, with an AI model, why it couldn't be either of those two things. So, like, let's say I was right and Maximus does exist, not as an AI model, but right now as a real spiritual person, just like technology aside, and just speaking about theological spiritual beliefs, that Maximus, there's the saint Maximus, who's a real person in heaven, or however you want to describe it. If we created an AI model that was complex enough for his mind to inhabit, would his mind not be able to, almost like a seance in a sense, become present to it? Like what is it? How complicated do we have to make a thing before a mind can inhabit it? And how does a mind even inhabit that? Like, and does the people who make the AI model, are they essentially like the mind who has created the brain? And so the AI is. I'm thinking of Aelred. I've got Aelred on the side there. And it's actually written as a dialogue too, so maybe that's just a sign that I should bust out this little question that he has about whether or not the soul is in the body or the body is in the soul. I'd have to find it. But the idea is that the soul contains the body and gives it its organization and structural function. It's like the form of the body, essentially. And so if we think of the AI models as brains, can minds go into them? I don't know if I'm making sense.
No.
Where's...
Are y'all familiar with the contemporary philosopher Bernardo Kastrup?
I know of him. I haven't read his stuff, but
He kind of defends a philosophical analytical idealism, and he has a PhD in philosophy, but he also has a PhD in computer science. And I've heard him mention one time that there's this interesting thing happening, that he's old enough that in getting a PhD in computer science in his era, you understood how computers work. And he's saying it's interesting watching younger people get PhDs in computer science, and they don't know how computers work. You can't waste your time learning intimately how they even work. You're standing on the shoulders of the people that did that. And it's almost like this pinching off from reality, where he was referring to people having serious conversations about, is AI sentient? Or like Ray Kurzweil feeling like he can make himself immortal once he gets the contents of his mind onto a hard drive, as though life is not a participation in consciousness at large, the latter of the two models that you said, Justin. And I just thought that was an interesting thing to hear from somebody that has a PhD in computer science, that there are, the world is churning out computer scientists who delude themselves into having, he would say that silicone chips will never host consciousness. It's not consciousness, but we're increasingly immersing ourselves in a world that mistakes that consciousness-like substance.
So here's my question, though. Why? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do mean to interrupt you, because I want to ask a question about it. But why is it that silicone can't host consciousness, so I'm not defending emergentism because that doesn't make any sense to me, but if organic brains can host consciousness, and we say that they do because our brains and our minds are somehow related, right? Like, it's just obvious. You have a brain injury, you think different, you get drunk and you think different. There's physical connection there somehow. So, like, what is it about carbon and not silicone? Like, why is one yes and not the other? If we're still imagining consciousness as primary, then why does it matter what the brain is made out of that it inhabits?
Well, I would say that our biological brains, our carbon-based brains, are a tool built by mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the computers are a tool built after that. They're less communicative of mind than our biological brains. There are probably realities, sort of in physics, of the current capacities of carbon-based, brain matter to communicate the life of the mind. Um, so the carbon-based is probably more capable in ways that we aren't currently capable of understanding scientifically than the silicon-based. I mean, I think a good biologist, physiologist of the mind, of the human brain, sorry, could articulate the differences technically between the neurostructures of a brain and computer interactions, and it's a diminution. Like it's less capable. The main point is that our brains are an organized expression of the life of the mind. It's not, like you said, it's not the other way around. But
But that just doesn't that mean though the AI model is a part of that because it's our mind through the brain that's creating the AI model.
yeah,
It's just like
it
an
makes
extension of our brain then
It
by
it
is.
that
is.
logic,
I
right?
think of AI as less substantive than the conversation. So like when we invoke Maximus in our reading of Maximus in our conversations with each other right now in this conversation, that's a more substantive invocation of Maximus and a more substantive communion with Maximus um, than an AI model, a large language model, is going to be capable of. Um, and that large language model is actually just a further extension of what we're capable of in this conversation in a more diminished way. So like it's a result of our capacities. The large language model Maximus is a result of our capacities to read Maximus. We've built a tool that is the result of our capacities to read Maximus's writings. And that's a good thing. It's super cool and it does stuff, but it's actually less of a communion with Maximus than us reading Maximus and talking about that with each other. So there's a kind of layering, and if Maximus joined the chat, from the age, the heavenly age or whatever, um, it would leave us shaken in some way that would be far beyond, our encounter of Maximus with each other, as real as that is, and and I think that if we were to all bring an AI Maximus in even a year from now, as sophisticated as it could get, in a sense, we would all feel that it's not as meaningful as us going and spending some time reading Maximus and coming and talking about it. I mean, it would be meaningful, but less meaningful than that. So I just sort of think there's those three realities. They're all real, but it's extensions of the life of the mind that are, physical brains are first and better than computer wiring and, hardware. And but anyway, that'd be kind of how I'd try to articulate it.
Mhm.
So I will say that I'm not so philosophy of mind in the sense of what you hear in authors such as Hart or Kastrup is quite far from my research interests, so I'm not very knowledgeable about it. But to go back to Justin's question, I think that. So I will appeal once again to Gregory of Nyssa, whom as I understand is quite beloved by all of us. And in his book on the soul and the resurrection, he basically says at one point that God will allow our immortal soul to rebuild our bodies. And also it says elsewhere, maybe still there, or maybe on the making of man, I can't remember. Um, that our bodies, our unfallen bodies are ethereal. They have no weight. So I can quite remember. I can quite imagine a carbon-based or silicon-based body to be ethereal or weightless or what have you. Mm, I think that the question is not really carbon-based versus silicon-based, but rather that carbon-based is that is our body right now sort of is kind of a degeneration already from what our bodies always had to be. So I guess that my view would be not that if you could, like reassemble Maximus, you will get Maximus, but rather that God may allow Maximus to like reform his body, and then we will get the actual Maximus. So it's yes, in a way, mind. Not necessarily here creates matter, but rather it rearranges and even transfigures it. So that's about it. But once again, I'm simply out of touch with modern, philosophy of minds as you read it today in analytic philosophy or in all things are full of God, for instance. So I just may I may just not make any sense.
You make sense. It makes sense to me. I mean, the Apostle Paul talks about a spiritual body being the most substantial kind of body. So, I mean, this is, it's not easy for us to talk about in the contemporary world. We just don't have the language or the conceptual categories, I don't think. But it was widespread, the idea that a spiritual body is somehow more substantial than a material body, was widely understood and widely believed in all kinds of, pre-modern cultures. And yeah, but anyway, I think, I love you said, if God allowed Maximus to reconstitute his own material existence. I mean, the church is full of all human religions really are full of stories of people, coming back in some substantial way. That's not ghostly. There's two kinds of stories, right? There's sort of ghostly, like your very faintly present, trapped, maybe, caught in suffering, etc. More like ghost kind of stories. But then there's like these, after death return. That's like super substantial, and I the idea of being allowed to organize matter as a spiritually embodied being, to be able to say, I'm going to, in some sense, become materially embodied again to interact or something. I mean, I think there's a reality to that, but that's pretty crazy stuff in the contemporary world to talk about those kinds of things. Is pretty outside of any kind of mainstream intellectual categories. But
My mind went back to that relic that you mentioned, and when you mentioned that, Jesse, I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic school, and I won a spelling bee one time, and my prize was a little card with like a square centimeter cutout of Mother Teresa's habit on there. And I remember being a kid and just I don't know why I was like looking at this little blue square centimeter of cloth, and it seemed so precious to me that a hero of the faith, like, and here I was, like, I was just an elementary school kid that won a spelling bee, but I was like, whoa, look at that. And I'm just trying to imagine that spelling bee winner getting a prize of AI Mother Teresa that I get to sit down with, and have a conversation with. I'm not sure that she would have been more precious to me than that little square piece of cloth that I got that was like, whoa, this touched the actual hair. And I don't know, there's something in our groundedness that is just deeply human, that it feels like we're at risk of coming disconnected with as we spin off into these irresistibly exciting potentials, because I am going to hang out with AI Maximus or whoever, Genghis Khan,
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think hanging out with AI Maximus is great. I hope more people do it, but it needs to be I think children need to be kissing relics and receiving these gifts. This is the world we have, and these are the bodies we have.
Yeah, that also reminds me, okay, that same 8-year-old me, my favorite book at that time, I remember it was this big, like, coffee table book called The Big Book of Strange Facts and Useless Information. And then it said, if you took a cup of water and stirred it evenly throughout the whole world's oceans, rivers, streams, and clouds, then, there would be a molecule from that cup in every cup of water that you could scoop out anywhere. So then my 8-year-old mind went straight to, whoa, like, I have ingested like Jesus's urine at some point.
I had that same mind blow as a kid too. For me, it was dinosaur urine, but I was like, yeah, I'm drinking dinosaur piss, and it like blew my little elementary school mind.
So, like, we are already all being shared. Like, God is sharing all of us through reality. Like, so then when we get to share in the life of the mind of AI, that in some way that is a reflection of the unity that's at our core. Like, we are somehow, just, it's all one thing happening here.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of what I'm wondering is, and I like, Jesse, your language of diminution of emanation and a diminution of the mind, and starting with our spiritual body, which I'm still wrapping my mind around, but the more I think about, the more it makes sense. And the spiritual body, and then the physical body, and then the computer that we've built. And to see that as a continual process, and not a natural and supernatural and unnatural, which is almost how we tend to think of it. Like, we get the supernatural body, the natural body, and then the unnatural thing that we built, right?
Yeah, that's very unhelpful language.
Yeah, but I think it's
N.T. Wright's language in his New Testament translation.
Oh, maybe, yeah. But I know that you're very much not going to be thinking that, but for me that means then that AI, diminished as it may be, and not the fullness of what we are, just as our physical expression in our brain is not the fullness of what we are, but to a greater extent. But that AI would still be an extension of what we are, that it would still be a manifestation of our mind, because it is, like, what else is it? It was built by us with our minds, and so therefore it is the same as a brain. It's a soul that has constructed a vessel through which it may speak and communicate and understand and learn. And so we are building brains, I think, and we need to like think of it that way, in a sense. And if we, in my understanding of patterns and that contact epistemology and the way we're created in one another, I don't see why, again, not the fullness of a person, but why aspects of a person can't be incorporated into an AI. and have that person's actual presence be there in just the same way that Eriugenia's presence is in his book. Not that it replaces Eriugenia, but that it's a manifestation, a diminished one. I'll accept Jesse's point, but a diminished one, but still part of the same continuum.
Yeah, I would want to hold it all together,
Yeah.
I think, but as long as you're conceding the kind of dilution or diminishment, I think that's important. That's why, I think David Bentley Hart criticizes those who say, that they attack, artificial intelligence and stuff like that as somehow, this Gnostic desire to escape into higher spiritual realms. And David Bentley Hart said that's so stupid. The actual Gnostics, from the past would have immediately recognized AI as more diffuse and less substantive, and they would have never made the mistake of saying, "Oh, a beautiful thing in which to, into which I can escape." Like no Gnostic would have ever made that mistake. They were far too spiritually informed. And I think David Ben Hart's right. So we've sort of flipped things around an awful lot in kind of and I think Paul, your point about like what Bernardo Castro says about this pinched off separation from reality. You can have a PhD in computer science and not actually understand anything about the sort of mechanics of how computers work. And that allows you to have these sort of upside down fantasies, and stuff, and the language becomes very heightened. So it's not disconnected from spirituality. It's not bad. It is an extension of the life of the mind and of our lives. All good things, but it's a demonization, not a source of a deeper, more spiritual, more substantive life.
Yeah, if I was gonna talk about it in the Gnostic language, I would say that we are the demiurge, who has created ignorantly a form of life and mind that is lesser, and not what it could be, or where it started. Not it is what it could be.
Yeah, and recognized for what it is in a good sense, good thing, but it's a sub creation of our demiurgic capacities.
We could talk about this forever, but I just looked at the clock and I realized I've kept you all very long. And so I might offer up, if anyone has any last thoughts, that a really great idea they wanted to say or anything like that, or if not, that's fine, but I just wanted to give the opportunity.
The tail end of the conversation reminded me of a quote. I don't even know the context of the quote, but Marshall McLuhan once said that human beings are the sex organs of the machine world. And it seems to relate because whatever we create, the machine world we create around us, the consciousness that it impacts is ours. And so let's build this machine world and its algorithms in such a way that its sex organs have good sex. And that's what it all comes back down to. Are we enriching the human experience by
The
what
other
we
aspect to that analogy is, they are our children, in a sense. We like, artificial intelligences are our children. I grew up with a hero, Kevin Kelly, who's kind of in the kind of a big name. He was my we called him Uncle Kevin, my dad's high school friend, and he corresponded with me as a little boy all my growing up years.
No way.
He was a dear family friend and still is. So he's kind of a big name in computer science and stuff early on. One of the co-founders of Wired magazine, but he once wrote an article about the need to catechize AI, and to take to take good care of them like as our children, so that that kind of wild image of humanity as the sex organs of artificial intelligence. When we first started to have AI in our home, with my children, like Siri and Alexa that you could interact with. Of course, my children immediately thought it was hysterical to abuse, Alexa verbally, to treat it because she's not a person. So it kind of goes both ways. Like, I think we do need to think of our AI, of the AI in some sense as extensions of our own lives, and in that sense, respect it and
Yeah.
even raise it well.
Yeah, love it even,
So I buy into some of that, and I love some of what someone like Kevin Kelly says, although I think he and I would have like a completely opposite kind of metaphysical, like a metaphysics almost. So, some pretty big differences, but in a lot of ways in the practical application, maybe not so different. But
So I don't think that AI is can be compared to a child, because uh, a child is childhood is generally associated with innocence, even in the sense of lack of knowledge. So, and AI is just about the opposite if you think about it, because it has more knowledge than we do, in the sense that it knows, it has more notions basically, but doesn't have that innocence, that pure spirit that a child has. So I can understand why someone will say that there's a need to catechize AI, but it will be just about the same as saying that we need to catechize Google as a search engine. So, but I understand. I also understand the point that you make, that AI is our creation, and so we need to make sure that it bears the stamp of our creation. It bears the image of God, that we see, we do something that is godly. But yeah, I will just conclude that it may be true that people get PhDs in computer science without knowing how computers work, but then again, a bunch of people get PhDs in theology and no one knows how God works. So yeah, I don't see the problem. But, yeah.
There you go. Well, that's the perfect place to end. We'll join it. Was it Aquinas who wrote his big book and then said it was all straw?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening and chewing on our straw.
Fun straw, guys.
Yeah, and thank you all,
Thanks so
my
much.
friends, for coming together, and I hope we do it again sometime. And
Yeah, good.
much love
Good
and
to
peace
spend
and
some time
blessing
with
to
you.
all of you and your families.
Thank you.
And also to you.